What's up, everyone? I'm Evan Olin.
And I'm Andy Large.
Welcome to Tattoo Dudes. Today on the show, we are talking with our buddy Matt, super collector known as the Ink Shrink. We're gonna pick his brain on how to get the perfect tattoo or how to build your collection. He's got a massive, incredible bodysuit, and we wanna just talk to him a little bit about his tattoo journey and how he got here and see what tips he has for you and how to get your own amazing tattoo collection. All right, so yeah, first up, Matt, your collection that you built, it's incredible. Our viewers want to know how to get their own incredible tattoo collection. When did you first start getting tattooed? And can you talk us through like your tattoo journey and how it started?
Sure, yeah, so I started getting tattooed about 25 years ago. Started off with the quintessential tramp stamp. I got right when I got to college when I turned 18. Didn't get tattooed again for quite a while after that. And then I started really building my collection about 10 years ago, right around the birth of my daughter, when I started getting some work, building up my sleeve, really in honor of my family. And so it's really been about the past 10 years that I've actually, I would say, considered myself a collector.
What was that like, kind of getting into that journey? Are there any tips? Do you have any thoughts about, how someone might start their journey as a collector and building up a collection of your magnitude?
Yeah, where do you begin?
Yeah, where does it start?
Wow. Yeah, I've got so many tips. I think one of the biggest things is really like researching your artist, researching the process, figuring out what it is that you really want to get out of getting tattooed. So like, is there a particular subject that you want to get done? Like for me, it started out, as I was talking about, with like building a sleeve in honor of my family, and then everything kind of evolved from there. And then as I get more into collecting, it was like there were particular styles that I wanted to get. I wanted to do some color realism and then some new school. And then, there are particular subjects that I wanted to get. For example, I have like a whole horror movie character leg sleeve. So I think really like starting to kind of plan out what you want.
Yeah.
Is there like a particular subject, theme, body part, full body suit, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Definitely like researching your artist is really critical too.
And how would you start going about that, researching your artist?
I think there are a lot of really good ways to do it. I mean, nowadays it's so easy with social media. Getting on Instagram is probably the biggest thing. That's really the best resource, because you can, right there there's Inked Mag. There are so many places where you can just easily find so many good artists. There are collections that you can go to, like Skin Art Mag and all sorts of other places. But that's a great place to start. Going to your local shop is a great place, because you can start talking with them about, like what ideas you might have, and they might be a really good resource. I think a really underrated place to go is going to conventions, because you can see in person like what work looks like and what's possible. I mean, nowadays there's so much that's possible, right? I mean, if you think it's almost anything is almost possible to render on skin. But that being said, like not every idea really is going to translate to skin. So going and seeing what's possible and seeing what people are doing and what the best artists are doing. And there are so many conventions. I mean, nowadays there's like a convention every weekend just about.
Yeah, and I think there's a value to, even if it's an artist you're familiar with, like if there's somebody that you're interested in and you're familiar with their work and you see that they're going to be at your local tattoo convention, there's a difference between seeing it in person and seeing it online. Like I think there's some value to going and checking it out at the convention too. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, and seeing work in person is really critical, because you want to be able to see also how it's healed, how it heals and holds up over time. I mean, like your work, I've got a piece for me now that's, a couple years old, and it looks phenomenal, right? And I'm really fortunate. That. Yeah, and I'm really fortunate, like the work that I have has held up. And, when I first started collecting 10 years ago, I got color realism, surrealism stuff. And, back then, 10 years ago, everybody said, well, that stuff doesn't hold up. It's never going to last. You need big, bold, heavy outlines for it to last. Well, that's obviously not proven true.
Sure.
But the best way you can see like what works, what doesn't work, is to see the work in person. I cannot emphasize that enough. Yes, like I said, going to Instagram or looking online is a great place to start, but that's where you start. That's not where you finish. You want to go and see the work in person whenever you can.
just kind of thinking like what your initial goals are for your bodysuit or for your, whether it's a sleeve or a bodysuit and subject matter and stuff like that.
Yeah, especially when, you definitely have, I think I had a very parallel experience where like a lot of my first tattoos and most people's first tattoos are like tattoos you personally connect with. It's like about you a little bit more. It feels safe. It's something that, you connect to family or maybe it's personal. And then as you get more and more tattoos, it becomes kind of less about you and a little bit more about the art or the artist, So when you started collecting a little bit more and getting from artists that you respected and kind of admired their work, like how did your goals change a little bit from starting this trajectory where it's like a lot about, this preconceived idea to like, you maybe don't know what you're gonna get. Maybe you get their style or something like you said.
No, that's such a good point. And it's like that classic question that you get asked by like family or friends who maybe aren't tattooed or don't have many tattoos. Like, well, what does that tattoo mean to you? Like, early on, like I always felt like I really had to justify it, and like nowadays, like especially with as covered as I am, I like saying like my tattoos don't mean anything. And like, of course that's not entirely true, but I love seeing that response from people. But that's exactly right. Like nowadays, like I love the suit that I have, but I was just flipping through Instagram before we started and I saw this piece where like, to me, like I'm not really sure like what the significance of this full back piece was to that person, but it's just such a beautiful piece of art.
Yeah.
And like that's the thing. Like, now like one regret that I have is like some of my stuff is so personal to me, and there are times where I'm like, man, I wish I just had like that like Mona Lisa or that type of thing like that would be on display at like the Louvre or something that like more of the world could appreciate.
And it's funny too that there's kind of this idea that because it's maybe not personal to you directly, like related to a memory or a family member or something specific, that it can't still have the same emotional impact on you. Like having good self-esteem or like loving your tattoos, feeling good about yourself, like that could be just as important or, equally as important to like an emotional connection, like a memorial or something. So to say like, oh, none of your tattoos mean anything because they're not, a tribute to somebody is, totally not fair,
Totally not fair at all. I mean, what tattoos have done to me for my own sort of self-image and confidence, and how I feel about myself. Some of the posts that I do on my social media where I'm not like wearing much clothes, like that's not something I ever would have done like years ago, because I really did not like my body, how I looked. And so like a lot of that is attributable to tattoos. And like you're saying, you can't put a value on
That's
that.
so cool. Yeah, like how that makes you feel, how it changes your life. It's awesome.
It changes your
I
life.
love when you do that, by the way. I look forward to your photos.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And I think that goes back to like what your goals are. Yeah. Just kind of thinking about that a little bit. If you do want to have the best bodysuit that you're the most proud of, like maybe, not everything has to be so thought out too. I mean, I think, that you put too many restrictions on it, that can impact the artwork. I think it's if you do have something that's meaningful and like it's important to you to get like a meaningful tattoo like that, just something to be aware of when you're talking to an artist, not putting too many restraints on that artist, or even is that artist the right fit for that tattoo.
That's such a critical point. Like finding the right artist for the tattoo that you want is so important, because if you have an artist that's super excited about your project, they're going to just put that, it's human nature, they're going to put that much more love and TLC into it versus somebody that's
100%.
They're going to do it for you, but maybe they're just not so into it. And I would really listen to that feedback. If you go and you do a consult with an artist either online or in person, and they give you the idea like, yes, they'll do it, but it's not totally their jam. Respect that. Maybe go fight, because there's so many artists nowadays. You can absolutely find somebody that's going to love your idea. I guarantee you. I have a human centipede tattoo on me. The person who did it loved doing it. So if I could
I didn't know you had a human centipede tattoo.
I do, yeah. Martin Lomax from Human Centipede.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he's on my leg.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I feel like I just totally sidetracked your camera because I'm like, I want to hear more about this human centipede tattoo.
But yeah, like if you can find somebody that's going to be willing to do a human centipede tattoo and put TLC into that, you can find somebody that's going to put TLC into anything.
Yeah.
And probably the opposite coin of that, whereas if you're more about wanting to get a tattoo from that specific person, maybe dialing back your idea to let them come through, because it's like you said, like if it's more important to you to get the tattoo, find the right artist. If it's more important you get tattooed by the artist, you know, work with someone that's more, you know, in their wheelhouse probably.
Yeah, and that's exactly how my bodysuits played out. There are some pieces I have, like the human centipede one, where I really wanted it, and so I wound up finding an artist who was down to do that. On the other hand, there were some pieces I have where I really wanted the work from that particular artist, and so I was a little bit more willing to compromise on what the exact subject matter was.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I think that really leads us into finding artists that you really admire and click with. And once you've done the research and you've gotten to that point, what are some tips or ideas for getting in with one of these artists? I mean, I think that can be intimidating for a lot of people. Like, just, you know, they find this guy and they're just blown away by his work, but it's like sometimes there can be a little bit of a barrier up and people don't really know how to approach it.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, follow their booking process. Like nowadays, people are usually pretty clear like what their booking process is, so respect it, whatever it is. If somebody says my book's open once a year, then like don't spam the hell out of them, like, you know, in that time frame, because chances are they're going to have that they themselves or like their booking manager is going to be like, hey, like this person's an a-hole and like they're spamming the hell out of you, so like probably like they're not going to be a client that you're going to want to work with. Or, you know, if there's somebody that has like a rolling booking process, like just stick with it and be persistent. Like that's one tip. It's not rocket science, but like really following the process makes a big difference. I think using connections as much as possible. So like we talked earlier about going to conventions, like that's a great way to like get to know people in person. Like you guys are usually super busy at conventions, but still I think there is an opportunity for you guys to put a face to a name. And like if I came up to you at a convention and was like, hey Evan, I've got this idea, and if you were super stoked on it, and then I like later on emailed you when your books were open, or like, hey, we talked about this at the such and such convention, like you probably would remember it, and like that would help me get my foot in the door.
I mean, that literally happens all the time. I feel like and it does, like you know, you get a sense for somebody, and like you said, like, you know, when you're just looking at an inbox, it's just a bunch of faceless names, and just putting a name to that face.
Networking in person.
What you mentioned about just respecting their process. You know, artists really all have different processes. So I think doing a little bit of minimal research into just what that artist's process is, because, you know, just because it works for one artist, you know, one artist, you can just walk into their shop and talk to them, doesn't necessarily mean that's the way another artist works. Sure. I think, you know, artists are you know, it really is like one of the last like small businesses. You know, many artists are handling their own booking, or they have one person, you know, handling the whole shop, but it really is a very personal process. It's hard to automate that process. And so yeah, man, I think, like you said, just being receptive and being respectful of what that process is.
Now that you have a lot of work too, do you ever find that like in a way that's like respectable and tasteful, like kind of mentioning, you know, that you have tattoos from other, you know, good artists, and kind of like, you know, including a picture of your work so that they get an idea like what they're going to be neighboring for working on their piece? Do you feel like that helps at all?
It definitely has, yeah. So nowadays, and not that I have much room left, I mean, I'm down to my literally like last couple little spots now, but I have like the last 6 months to a year, like I'll send like pictures of my full body suit and be like, hey, you know, I've got work from almost 30 artists, and like I'll name some people, you know, especially if it's people that I think that particular artist knows. Like if it's a realism artist, like I'll list some other realism artists, right? And be like, you know, I'd love to add your work to this particular collection. And especially if I know, like, you know, I have a big rib piece from Evan, and I know some of the people that he knows that I've either have work from or want to work from, like, so I may name drop Evan with those people, or I may even ask Evan, like, hey, do you mind if I mention your name to such and such person?
I mean, it worked on me when I tattooed you. You know, I was hyped to tattoo, you know, not only near or on somebody who'd been tattooed by people that I admired, but also like tying into Tyler's work and Jesse Ricks's work. Yeah, it's awesome, man. I think it's fun for that artist, and it also, you know, it's not a foolproof, but it's also like, hey, if this guy, can get in with all these artists and they can handle him, he's probably not an asshole either.
I think so. Yeah, it's a good sign that they're probably a good person to work with. They can sit for a while. They got a big collection. They had to get through it somehow.
And they're going to be serious. Like they know how to sit through it. They're going to heal well. Exactly.
Yeah.
One thing I found too is that it seems like everybody that I've gone to as I've gotten further along wants to up their game.
Nice.
So people who maybe would have let that one little detail slide or whatever, we're like, nope, I gotta go back in there. I gotta put that one last little detail in there. So.
When you get a limited spot, every little bit counts.
Yeah.
Well, and they're comparing it to what's right next to it too. That's interesting.
Oh, I think there's one other thing too.
Yeah.
And now your tattoos are all connecting and you're having some weird area, or you used to have weird areas, now they're all kind of filling up now, but how did you go about planning for areas that you have black and gray artists or color artists, maybe little gaps that are appearing, stuff like that? How do you plan for stuff like that, the unplannable stuff, little gaps in sleeves and stuff?
That's a really good point. It's something that I think I mostly get really fortunate with, but I would definitely advise people, if you're planning on going for extensive coverage and having different styles that you think may merge together, to start thinking about how that's going to play together aesthetically, and to start connecting with artists and talking about that with them ahead of time, for how you want it to get mapped out. So at one point I had on my horror character leg sleeve these couple of super awkward gaps, and thankfully I had a really good relationship with Timmy B and Lindsay Baker, and I was able to go to them and be like, hey, would you guys mind doing some weird gory gap filler? And they were down for doing it. Same thing with Tyler Malik on some of my torso. He was able to fill in some galaxy stuff that flowed really well. But I can't tell you that it's because I had it planned out ahead of time. It was more just good fortune that it worked out that way. But I don't think if I had not had good relationships with them, it would have been really hard for me to be like, hey, I've got these really random spots in my inner thigh and my groin and the back of my knee. I'm not sure exactly how I would have gone about filling those spots if I did not have good relationships with those folks.
That's really
nice. I think that ties in too with wanting, artists wanting to be a part of your collection. If you maybe didn't take so much care to build up the main showpieces, people, if it's just kind of for lack of a better word, a throwaway gap filler or whatever, people might not treat those spots with as much care. But I think seeing what's around it, there's you built up this this kind of there's a standard, and I feel even if it's a smaller spot, you want to uphold that standard.
Yeah, it's gluing two really important things together.
Yeah.
It's two Mona Lisas are getting glued together by this little thing, make it cool and gory or whatever.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy how much difference those small little spots make too, and bringing everything together. You go in for that day, when I get my traps filled in.
Yeah.
That was one of the last spot on my torso, how much difference it made. Totally. Bringing everything, my two arms together, my whole torso together. So that's cool.
That's cool, man. I like hearing too that it wasn't just you had an idea, you were oh, I'm gonna get gore stuff later. You solve that problem by just having a good relationship, by being a good client, and artists being stoked to do it for you,
Yeah, I get fortunate.
That's cool.
When you talk about, the booking and reaching out to people, we were saying that artists are super busy, sometimes the process is different, sometimes our artists, by our very nature, we're not always the most organized people. Do you ever have experiences where you've reached out to people and they maybe haven't gotten right back to you, or it just maybe you followed all these rules and it maybe didn't work out the way you wanted?
Maybe they never get back.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Does that happen?
Yeah. There are definitely some people. I mean, I'm not going to name names because it's not personal.
Yeah.
Right. There are people that, even we were talking earlier about how I've tried, to name drop or show hey, I've got this full bodysuit, and even that hasn't worked. Following everybody's booking process. There was a really well-known person at a convention about a year ago, and I sent that person an idea totally up that person's alley based on their portfolio, and I had previously emailed that person, followed their booking process a few times, and I've never heard back.
I'm sorry, Matt.
No,
jeez.
It wasn't you. You were hard to get in with the first couple times.
Was I?
Yeah,
well, I think Actually, that's interesting. It leads me right into another thing is that I was, when you reached out to me at first, I was, not because I didn't want to tattoo you by any means, but I was just at a period where my books were super, super full. For me, it ended up working out really well when you dropped that not only were you willing to come to the shop, but you were willing to possibly travel to a convention, or you know, you were just flexible with where you were willing to go.
Yeah. Well, and that to me is something that sometimes I think people get a little bit short-sighted on. Like I've heard people, you know, friends and family, especially people who aren't as into the tattoo community as I am, but like kind of like scratch their heads, like, really, you're willing to fly for a tattoo or whatever? I'm like, well, yeah. I mean, I'm gonna be like sitting there all day anyway, like not doing anything. So like, and the cost of travel is a drop in the bucket compared to what you're spending for a good tattoo anyway. So yeah, it's worth it. I think that's a great way to find artists if you're not just limiting yourself to a narrow geographic area. I mean, I'm fortunate I live in New England, so there's a ton of really good tattoo artists by me. But that said, like if there's a particular artist whose work I wanted, like, why would I not say like, well, I'm not going to go to Chicago or California? I mean, yes, I'm not trying to say it's completely insignificant, but still a few $100s when you're going to spend probably a couple $1,000s at least. I don't know. I think it's worth it.
Makes a lot of sense.
All right, so that takes us to the end of talking to Matt about his tattoo collection. Matt, thank you so much for sharing all that insight with us. Make sure you follow Matt at Inkshrink on the Instagram. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. See you next time.
See you next time.
Should I not introduce ourselves again? I guess we don't ever do that, huh?
Nah, we probably don't need to do that in the outro.
I don't think so. I'm Andy. This is the Inkshrink.